Did you know that the Titanic was doomed from the moment it left the port? Today, we will reveal the secrets and fatal errors that made the Titanic's sinking inevitable. If you are curious about how small mistakes can lead to major disasters, stay with me in this video. You will discover surprising details about the ship's design, navigation decisions, and communication failures that sealed the Titanic's fate. This information is not only fascinating but can also help you understand how to avoid critical mistakes in your own daily decisions, whether at work, in studies, or in personal life. Have you ever made a decision that seemed small but had significant consequences? Have you ever wondered how to predict and avoid catastrophic errors? Join us on this journey through time and learn valuable lessons from one of the greatest maritime disasters in history. But first, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. In 1912, the RMS Titanic was the largest and most luxurious passenger ship in the world. With a length of 269 meters and a capacity for more than 2,200 people, it was a symbol of technological innovation and naval engineering progress. Dubbed the unsinkable ship, the Titanic promised a safe and comfortable crossing of the Atlantic, from Southampton to New York. Its grandeur and promises of safety attracted passengers from all social classes, from the wealthiest magnates to immigrants seeking a new life in America. With 16 watertight compartments and watertight doors, the Titanic was considered a masterpiece of maritime safety. It was believed that even in the event of a collision, these compartments would prevent the ship from sinking. But behind this facade of safety, there were hidden fatal errors and questionable decisions. The journey that should have been a triumph of modern engineering would turn into one of the greatest maritime tragedies in history. To understand why the Titanic was destined to sink, we need to examine more closely the design flaws of the ship and the crucial decisions made during its maiden voyage. Let's dive into the details and discover how each of these factors contributed to the inevitable disaster. Although the Titanic was considered a marvel of engineering, there were critical flaws in its design. The watertight compartments, designed to prevent the ship from flooding entirely, were a point of pride. However, these compartments did not extend to the upper deck. This meant that if several compartments were flooded, the water could spill over from one to the next, as happened on that fateful night. Additionally, there were problems with the construction of the hull. The Titanic's hull was relatively thin and, in some places, inadequately reinforced. This fragile design could not withstand the impact with the iceberg, resulting in large tears that sealed the ship's fate. The construction materials also contributed to the tragedy. The steel used to build the Titanic's hull, though considered adequate at the time, was more brittle in cold temperatures. When the Titanic collided with the iceberg, the cold temperature of the North Atlantic made the steel even more susceptible to cracking, exacerbating the damage caused by the collision. Another critical problem was the rivets used to hold the hull plates together. Many of the rivets were made of inferior quality iron, and upon impact, they snapped, allowing the hull plates to separate. This failure of the rivets significantly increased the extent of the damage, allowing more water to enter the ship rapidly. These engineering and construction material issues formed a lethal combination. The inadequate design of the watertight compartments, the fragility of the hull, the inferior quality of the steel, and the defective rivets all contributed to making the Titanic's sinking inevitable. With these critical flaws, the ship's fate was almost sealed from the start. But these design problems were just one part of the story. The navigation decisions made during the voyage also played a crucial role. Let's explore these decisions and understand how they contributed to the disaster. When planning the Titanic's maiden voyage, the chosen route was one of the fastest between Southampton and New York. However, this route passed through an area known for the presence of icebergs, especially in the spring. At that time of year, large blocks of ice would break off from the glaciers of Greenland and float southward, directly into the Titanic's path. During the voyage, the Titanic received several warnings from other ships about the presence of icebergs on the route. These warnings, however, were not duly considered. The crew did not reduce speed or significantly alter the route, believing that the Titanic could easily navigate away from any danger. One of the most controversial decisions was to maintain a high speed of about 22 knots, even in known dangerous areas. Captain Edward Smith and the White Star Line were determined to impress the world with the Titanic's speed and capabilities, aiming to reach New York ahead of schedule. This decision was influenced by fierce competition among shipping lines to set crossing time records. The high speed drastically reduced the crew's reaction time when an iceberg was sighted directly in the ship's path. With less than a minute to maneuver, the emergency maneuvers were not enough to avoid the collision. If the Titanic had been traveling at a lower speed, the crew would have had more time to react and possibly avoid the impact. These navigation decisions, influenced by the desire for speed and overconfidence in the ship's capabilities, were fundamental to the ensuing tragedy. The route through iceberg-infested waters and the decision to maintain dangerous speeds made the Titanic's sinking an inevitable catastrophe. Communication failures and lack of emergency preparedness also played a crucial role. Let's explore how these failures further contributed to the Titanic's tragedy. During the voyage, the Titanic received several warnings from other ships about the presence of icebergs on the route. At least 6 messages were sent on the day of the sinking, warning of large ice fields ahead. However, these warnings were not taken seriously. In many cases, the messages were delivered too late or did not even reach the captain or the navigation officers. One of these messages came from the ship Californian, reporting a large ice field ahead. Despite the urgency, the message was not properly prioritized. The Titanic's radio operator, overwhelmed with passenger messages, failed to pass on all critical warnings to the bridge. The communication system on board the Titanic had its limitations. The ship was equipped with a modern Marconi telegraph, but the overload of personal messages from passengers and the lack of additional operators created a bottleneck. Important iceberg messages got mixed with less urgent ones, reducing the effectiveness of communication. In addition to problems with external communication, there were significant failures in internal communication. The rigid hierarchy and lack of clear protocols for transmitting critical information resulted in a slow and disorganized response. When iceberg warnings arrived, they were not immediately communicated to the navigation team on deck. These communication failures were disastrous. If the warnings had been received and heeded promptly, the Titanic could have reduced speed or altered its course in time to avoid the collision. The inefficiency of the communication system directly contributed to the sinking, making the tragedy even more inevitable. One of the most severe failures on the Titanic was the insufficient number of lifeboats. Despite having a capacity for more than 2,200 people, the ship was equipped with only 20 lifeboats, capable of accommodating about 1,178 people, less than half the passengers and crew on board. Originally, the Titanic was designed to have 64 lifeboats, but this number was drastically reduced to free up more space for leisure areas and provide a cleaner view of the decks. The logic behind this fatal decision was based on overconfidence in modern technologies and the belief that the Titanic was unsinkable. Maritime regulations at the time were also outdated and based on the gross weight of the ship, not the number of passengers. This combination of overconfidence and inadequate standards resulted in a tragic shortage of lifeboats. Besides the insufficient number of lifeboats, the Titanic's crew was not adequately trained to handle an emergency evacuation. Safety drills, which should have been conducted regularly, were neglected. When the disaster struck, many crew members did not know how to launch the lifeboats or coordinate the evacuation effectively. The lack of training contributed to the chaos and confusion during the sinking. When the Titanic began to sink, the evacuation quickly turned into a scene of panic. There was an uneven distribution of passengers in the lifeboats, with many boats leaving without being fully occupied. Amid the chaos, some people were prevented from boarding the lifeboats due to rigid class divisions, while others hesitated to leave the ship, believing it would be saved. The rescue conditions were extremely challenging. The temperature of the North Atlantic water was below freezing, and the darkness of the night made visibility difficult. Many who fell into the water quickly succumbed to hypothermia. Those who managed to get into the lifeboats faced fear and uncertainty while waiting for rescue. The RMS Carpathia, about 58 miles away, responded to the Titanic's distress call. Traveling at full speed, the Carpathia took about 4 hours to reach the site. When it finally arrived, It rescued the survivors from the lifeboats, but for many, help came too late. Of the more than 2,200 people on board, only 705 survived. The Titanic tragedy revealed critical flaws in design, navigation, and rescue capacity. However, from this catastrophe came important lessons and changes in maritime safety standards. The Titanic's sinking shocked the world and exposed severe flaws in maritime safety standards. In response to this tragedy, several crucial changes were implemented to prevent future disasters. One of the main changes was the requirement that all ships have enough lifeboats to accommodate all passengers and crew on board. This simple but essential measure ensured that the lack of lifeboats would never again put so many lives at risk. In 1914, the first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SALAS, was established. This convention set strict standards for maritime safety, including mandatory procedures for evacuation drills and regular inspections of safety equipment. SALAS is still in force today, continuously updated to reflect technological advances and best safety practices. Another significant impact was the improvement of maritime communication systems. The Titanic tragedy highlighted the need for faster and more efficient communications between ships and shore authorities. As a result, legislation was introduced to ensure that all ships maintained constant radio watch and that radio operators were properly trained. These improvements ensure that distress calls can be sent and received without delay. The Titanic story offers valuable lessons about complacency and the importance of preparation. First, we must never underestimate nature and the risks involved in any endeavor. Overconfidence in technology and ignoring warnings can have disastrous consequences. Second, the importance of being prepared for emergencies cannot be overstated. Proper training and clear safety procedures can save lives in critical moments. The Titanic's legacy is a continual reminder of the lessons learned and the improvements made in maritime safety. Modern ships are equipped with advanced navigation and communication technology, stringent safety protocols, and intensive crew training. These changes ensure that a tragedy of such magnitude is less likely to occur again. The Titanic's sinking was a tragedy that cost many lives but also served as a turning point in global maritime safety. By honoring the memory of those who perished, we continue to work to ensure that the lessons of the Titanic are never forgotten and that the seas are safer for all. The Titanic tragedy was a landmark event in maritime history, but also a powerful lesson on the importance of safety, communication, and preparation. By looking back and learning from past mistakes, we can build a safer and more responsible future for all who navigate the seas.